Well, good evening, everybody. Hi, I'm Phil Stasek, and I'm the past president of the Space Coast Progressive Alliance, and we're welcoming you to another wonderful First Thursday event. Tonight's event is called Looking Forward, Restoring Vital U.S. Institutions. Tonight, we're going to be talking about what is happening to the American government after the past 4 years of destruction and misbehavior of the previous administration. It is now time to rebuild the American government and rebuild Americans' trust in our institutions. We've watched the literally stripping, the gutting of the State Department, the EPA, the CDC, the Postal Service. Here in Florida, our Florida Health Department, it is just, it's a very, very sad thing to see for those of us that have, that frankly love what our government can do for us, that have great pride and patriotism in our country. It has been a very, very sad 4 years. Tonight we have four wonderful speakers that will be on a panel that will be explaining what can be done to rebuild our institutions, what must be done in their perspective, because each of them has a different perspective on this. We'll be introducing them in a few minutes. But we are so glad that all of you are here. And the first thing that I should do is I should pass the mic over to the current president of the Space Coast Progressive Alliance, Raed Al-Shaibi.
Thank you, Phil. It's an honor to join you and this wonderful panel that we have tonight. This is a great program that, first of all, I want to welcome everyone who's joining us tonight. I hope that we get everyone on tuned. We have unbelievable speakers that we've met in the past, of course, in person. But unfortunately, due to this current environment we have, we get to do it this way, and hopefully this will give us a chance to expand and get a lot of other people to join and listen and learn something tonight. It's an important subject, and I want to thank our Action Project Committee that worked on this program. Actually, this program, when we worked on it, it was in January, before the big event at the Capitol, the last week of election. And it was interesting how when we did the digital and we had the Capitol split in half, and how this country is split in half, and how our institutions have been monopolized and by certain different pools, and people are confused, and we are being challenged. The democracy is being challenged, and we just can't. I can't wait to hear and listen to great speakers tonight that can give us shed some lights on what's going on and how we can move forward as a country. The beginning of the year, I just want to let everyone know that we have a new board that just got elected. So I want to thank our previous board for being just unbelievable. Last year we had 9 program in this environment that we have, and great attendance. And I want to thank Phil, of course, our past president. We'll always look for your support in the future, and you're always with us. I know that. And also I want to thank APC. We have 2 great leaders that put this program together, Larry and Bonnie. Thank you for making it happen. And I know there's a lot of support behind Jan. Everyone put a lot of efforts on this program. Our membership is important to us. We're growing, and a lot of people are joining us on online right now. Just want to pitch this in. This is the only way we can keep this programs going on a monthly basis. It's only $25 per person. If you can join us for the year, or for the family, it's $35. Would love to have you a member of Space Coast Progressive Alliance. You can join us. You can look for our website. It's www.scpaflorida.com. And we just renew it. It has a lot of information, and I encourage everyone to visit and share your comments. There's a lot of areas that you can contribute. You can share your volunteer time. Of course, everyone is doing it offline right now. But looking forward to a great program today. Just want to remind everyone that next program is about another great topic, and I just want to bring it up now. It's about COVID cover-up. A shot of trust. It's on March 4th, and we have great panels. So I hope that everyone can join us next month as well. So, do want to take the time from Phil to introduce this great speaker. So I'm looking forward to listening to them. So, bring it back to you, Phil. Give us some more insight on our wonderful speakers tonight.
Thank you, Ryan. It's wonderful to have you. We really appreciate your service to our community.
Thanks, sir.
And so tonight's program, Looking Forward, Restoring Vital Institutions, is an opportunity for us to talk to three very experienced folks that understand what's going on in politics in our state and in our nation. Our first speaker tonight will be Ana Escamani. She was born and raised in Orlando. Representative Escamani is the daughter of working class immigrants, and she was elected to serve District 47 in the Florida House of Representatives. She is an amazing woman. She, and I'll tell you, her sister too, they are really, really amazing people who have done so much for our community, and they know what's going on, especially here in the state of Florida, but really around the country and around the world. Next up would be Corey Westbrook. Corey has spent 20 years working in the U.S. Congress, serving administrations in Washington, D.C. to protect our air, water, and wildlife. She did this at the National Wildlife Federation, Oceana. She currently is a senior advisor for the Endangered Species Coalition, and she's also a former congressional candidate. And then our last speaker tonight will be former three-term Congressman, progressive activist, and attorney, Alan Grayson. Alan, interestingly enough, is a guy who actually has gotten a lot done in Congress. I think he was rated as like the most effective member of Congress by, I think it was Slate Magazine, because he got so much legislation passed in his time as a progressive Democrat. I mean, he is a man who has made a lot of us very proud. And each of these folks can see from different angles why it is so important that we have a healthy and functioning government institutions. I would like to remind everybody tonight that while the panel is speaking, that the audience will be on mute, and that way we won't be talking over each other. And everybody that's here on Zoom will get a chance to be part of a Q&A after each of our speakers talks for about 20 minutes. So about an hour from now, we're going to turn the program over to you, the audience. So you will all get a chance to participate and to ask questions and get your input there. We're going to ask people to use the Zoom functions where you can, in the lower corner, typically lower right corner, where you can raise your hand. And when we see you raising your hand, we'll then call on you. But that will be in the Q&A portion about an hour from now. So let's get going with our first speaker tonight, Ana Escamani. Ana, it is so wonderful to have you back with us as a previous guest, and you're such an eloquent speaker. What is your perspective?
Well, thank you so much, Phil, for the invitation. And it's an honor to be here today alongside our other two panelists. And I'm a long time supporter of our Space Coast Progressive Alliance. And folks know that I used to work at Planned Parenthood of Southwest and Central Florida, where I really first got to connect with all of our Brevard activists. And I just want to say it's been amazing to watch you all grow, especially after the 2016 election cycle, and just seeing the progressive movement in Brevard County come out loud and proud to advocate for candidates at every level of government. And of course, to bring together these really important issues and to bring us together to unpack what's happening around us in our federal government, our state government, and of course in our everyday lives. And so today's topic, I think, is very timely because we're coming together in the beginning of two really important political moments. One is the election and the beginning of a new president, not only one of the most progressive presidents in our nation's history based on the stances he's taken and his evolution over time, but also, of course, having the first ever woman and woman of color, a Black woman, and a woman of Southwest Asian descent, Kamala Harris. And that is historic. And, you know, actually, one of my constituents sent me a face mask that has Madam Vice President's face on it. And somebody asked me if that was my face on that mask. And it was such an incredible moment to say, actually, that's our vice president. And, I'm just getting goosebumps because since when has the vice president ever looked like me, right? Or looked like the woman in this space? I mean, that is just remarkable, I think, for so many of us. And quite inspirational. So that's an important piece. But there's also the beginning of the state legislative session. Of course, I'll focus my remarks on how the work of the White House impacts us here in Florida. But I would be amiss if I didn't lift up the fact that legislative session is beginning. We're in committee weeks right now. I got back from Tallahassee at around 1 a.m. this morning, and I go back on Monday again. And things are rough. Things are rough in Tallahassee. We lost seats this past election cycle. And so we're dealing with a Republican majority that is pushing forward an anti-protesting bill, an anti-big tech bill, and completely ignoring issues like unemployment, issues like mass incarceration, issues like clean air and clean water, education, and really just putting everything towards a Trump America. And with President Trump calling Florida home, I think it's really important that we prepare for what that could look like in our state when it comes to his rhetoric and his policies taking root here. With that said, there is so much to be hopeful for. And when I look at the Biden administration's first days in office, there's been just a flow of executive orders. And of course, these executive orders have, in every sense of the way, repealed a lot of former President Trump's horrific policies, whether it was on immigration, women's healthcare and rights, LGBTQ plus equality. And so I'll just touch on a few before I pass it to Corey to share more from her experience as being in DC. And of course, I unfortunately have a call at 7:15, so I'm gonna have to hop off early tonight, but I'll stay for as long as I can. But some of these executive orders are just so profound in resetting our values as a country. So my first point brings me to the repeal of the Muslim travel ban, which of course directly impacted my family as an Iranian American. And many folks know my origin story. My parents are actually both immigrants from Iran that came to Orlando. They met in Orlando. And so that travel ban was personally painful, but of course, just looking at our foundation as a nation of immigrants was completely just the antithesis of who we are as a country. And the fact that the Biden administration removed that executive order that former President Trump put into place absolutely sets us on the right track to get immigration policy right. And of course, most recently, the Biden administration has tried to end deportations temporarily. Unfortunately, a Trump-appointed judge halted that effort. But we have seen President Biden put into place new orders to convene stakeholders around immigration policy and to really reimagine what immigration policy looks like. And I want to be clear, some of these efforts too are opening up the United States citizenship and immigration services. The Trump administration had paused many visas from getting processed. There have been many calls to my office, though I'm not a member of Congress, so I don't have a connection directly to the immigration services. But many immigrants have come to our office because they're waiting for their visas to get updated. They have these delays. And it was the Trump administration that was slowing down the process for many folks who are in this country, who work in this country, go to school in this country, and want to contribute, even attacking our students, which I think was so important for us to make note of, because the Trump administration's mentality towards Black and brown people wasn't just targeted towards the undocumented, which is another area of such importance. The Biden administration is resetting as well, allowing our dreamers to have extended support here. But it also was targeted towards all immigrants. And some of his DHS rules that were pending as his term was coming to an end included only allowing certain immigrant students who are here with documentation to only be allowed to study for 2 years in the United States of America, which is not only just a racist policy and a xenophobic policy, but it's a brain drain. Like, we need the talent, right? Like, we so many of our biggest accomplishments as a country has been crafted by immigrants. And to quote one of our favorite musicals, immigrants get the job done. And so it's so important that we recognize those changes. And of course, we continue to push forward for comprehensive immigration reform and really become a country that welcomes the sick and welcomes the tired and welcomes those who want to give to this country versus reject them. To that point, bring us to domestic issues. LGBTQ plus equality. You might have heard yesterday a major announcement from Equality Florida, the state's LGBTQ rights organization, that made the announcement that due to President Joe Biden's executive order broadening the interpretation of the recent Supreme Court success for LGBTQ plus equality in public accommodations and workplaces and so forth, Florida's Commission on Human Rights is now taking into consideration discrimination based on sexual orientation and gender identity, to the point where the Competitive Workforce Act, CWA, legislation that we've all talked about at state level, is actually not needed right now because of that executive order broadening the interpretation of that Supreme Court case, which, like I said, in Florida, the Commission on Human Rights, which is the state agency that plays that equity oversight role, has embraced and is now defining discrimination on those terms. That is such a real life example of how we move forward as a country and how the executive branch directly impacts how we're able to protect one another and support one another here in the Sunshine State. Finally, I just want to highlight environmental issues, which I know Corey will probably speak more to, so I won't speak to it too much. But it's refreshing to see appointments made to the EPA that don't come from the swamp, but actually come from areas that are challenging fossil fuel companies and focused on environmental justice and eliminating environmental racism. And so to have those elements restored at a federal level is going to be so key to protecting our waterways and our conservation efforts here in Florida. On the front of reproductive rights, I'm proud to say the Biden administration has repealed the gag rule. For those who don't know, the global gag rule is a policy that prevents any nonprofit organization around the world that receives support from the United States from even talking about abortion. And this sets such a disparity for women and girls across the globe who very well, in the best medical interest, should seek access to an abortion. And yet those doctors that benefit from U.S. support internationally can't talk about it. So seeing this rule get repealed is a step in the right direction. And it also hopefully echoes what will be a proactive reproductive health care agenda at a federal level throughout the country. As here in Florida, we are facing another abortion ban, a 20-week abortion ban being filed in the state legislature, which I have no doubt will be one of our biggest fights going to Tallahassee this session. I'm proud to say that I will be in that bill's first committee stop. So we're definitely going to make some noise if it does come to us, and ensure that we're centering the conversation on those most directly impacted by these heinous and shameful and politically motivated bans that do nothing to support women and girls and everything to attack us. In closing, before I toss it back and we hear from our fellow speakers, I think the tone that the Biden administration sets is also going to be a healthy step in the right direction. Tallahassee gets partisan, but it never gets to an insurrection. And I think that there is something to be said about all the politicians that subscribe to Trump's behavior, who are now kind of vying to be the next Trump. And unfortunately, you do have a few of those in Brevard County, who I'm talking about, that absolutely are trying to carry that mantle. And I hope, I really hope that it becomes a fringe movement, not a mainstream movement. And of course, we're going to have to be very intentional in calling it out, whether it takes shape in sexist language or racist language, xenophobic language, or just anti-democratic language, to say that it's not okay to be aligned with insurrectionists. And some of the trolls that go after me on social media after January 6th, I took my earrings off, my gloves off. I was like, no, like you're not coming here and spewing your hate, as we just saw a attempted coup by people you align with. And so making that clear to our colleagues is so important, especially as they try to co-opt our movements. In the case of facing an anti-protesting bill right now in the legislature, which came about because of Governor Ron DeSantis's efforts to further divide us along racial tensions versus address police brutality and address the importance of Black Lives Matter. He has tried to rewrite the narrative of that bill by tying it to a response to January 6th. And my response has been, you're not a credible spokesperson what happened on January 6th because your behavior consented to it. So we have to be very, very direct in calling out our opponents, while also leading by example and being civil and being as generous and empathetic as possible to everyday people that fell victim to that rhetoric. Because at the end of the day, in my district, it's a swing seat. We swung this seat from red to blue in 2018. We won it in 2020 by a larger margin than in 2018. I'm proud to say that 2 precincts that voted for President Trump voted for me. And I have no doubt it's due to the fact that we are transparent, we are accessible, we're committed to helping Floridians through economic despair, through any challenge they face. And at the end of the day, for a Trump voter, that's what they deserve. That's what they're looking for. They're looking for someone who cares about them, just like any other voter would. And we shouldn't lose focus on that. So thank you again for the invitation. Thanks for having me. I will stick on for as long as I can, but looking forward to our next speakers. And I'm also here to answer questions in the chat. Folks have questions for me. I'll happy to respond back while I'm here. And we'll see what the next 4 years bring us. But please remember that, yes, we're going to hopefully see some great success at a federal level, but the work at a state level continues. And we need all hands on deck to protect our rights here in the Sunshine State.
Thank you so much, Anna. I'll tell you what, I want to give you a big round of applause, and I want you to feel it. I want actually Anna and Corey and Alan, I want all 3 of you to feel the love that's in the room. You know that if you were in the room with us, as we normally are at the Front Street Civic Center, we'd be giving you big hugs, we'd be clapping, and you would be getting the direct response that you deserve. However, we're so glad that all 3 of you are here. Anna, having you in Tallahassee is so important. As we often tell our audiences, and whenever we get a chance to speak publicly, all politics is local. When people focus only on the president, when they go to vote, they need to pause for a minute and realize people at the municipal, at the county level, at the state level, these are all candidates who need your love and attention, and that little bit of extra change you might have in your pocket, or willingness to knock on a door. Because people stepped forward to help Anna, we've got her in Tallahassee. This is a big deal, and having more people like Anna in the future is going to be important. So, you know what? 2 years from now, we're going to be all rallying around the flag, and hopefully we can get some support and assistance for Anna up there in Tallahassee. Our next speaker, Corey Westbrook. She's the senior advisor for the Endangered Species Coalition, former congressional candidate, a true supporter, a person who has given blood, sweat, and tears to defend our environment, our Indian River Lagoon, and frankly, global environmental work. And she has seen so much destruction in the EPA, in our structures that support the environment over the past 4 years. Corey, what are we going to do?
Thanks, Phil.
You're welcome.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Excellent. I am so excited to be with the Space Coast Progressive Alliance. I've had so much fun going to meetings in the past. I miss you guys. So thank you so much for having me today. I think I might be a little bit darker and more negative than Anna was, just because of the nature of what has happened to the environment over the past 4 years. It's been horrifying, right? Trump has rolled back over 130 environmental safeguards. So it's been devastating. He's done it through rule changes and policy changes. And some of them were just automatic, like Obama had done something good, so Trump just flipped it and changed it immediately. But some of them were changes to laws that have been around for decades and even one that's been around for a century. So his damage is extremely far reaching. So I'm just going to hit a few highlights so we all are on the same page of the situation we're in. EPA, public health. Trump administration limited how EPA can evaluate risks from toxic chemicals, including ones that give children brain cancer. He's done 6 policies affecting chemical safety. He restricted scientific studies that EPA can use. That was a last-minute nightmare. He allows power plants to leak waste into our waterways, which we don't need. And he scaled back oversight of mine safety and drill platform safety, just setting us up for another Deepwater Horizon. But one of the huge ones that he did right at the last minute that directly impacts Florida was Trump and DeSantis. The EPA gave away its authority under the Clean Water Act to issue 404 permits and gave it to the state of Florida's Department of Environmental Protection, which is underfunded, understaffed, never does enough enforcement, and generally doesn't like to protect the environment. That was a stunner. They put that together in August and it passed in like December, and it's breathtaking in scope about how horrifying that is for the state of Florida. Climate change. Okay, so that was all public health. Weakened efficiency standards on basically everything. Approved seismic air drilling in the Arctic National Wildlife Refuge. Delayed a plan to limit methane leaks from landfills and oil and gas wells. And methane is as bad as carbon dioxide. It's one of the big global warming gases. Loosened caps on carbon pollution from power plants. That was a huge Obama initiative. Bam, he turned that around in like a day and just shut that thing down. Revoked California's Clean Air Act standards. It used to be so goes California, so goes the country because of their economy of scales. Took away all California's power to protect its own citizens. That's EPA. Now let's talk about the Department of Interior. He stripped federal protections for 30 million acres of public land and water. He reduced the size of Obama's monuments and even got rid of some completely, the ocean ones. Drill, baby, drill. He was getting ready to drill the Atlantic coast, the Arctic Ocean, just anywhere. He gave out seismic air gun testing. You know, we fought that in Florida. I know DeSantis and Trump kind of made some weird deal, but there's been a lot of leasing. Okay, so this takes us to what did he do to my favorite law, the Endangered Species Act. We are in a biodiversity extinction crisis, along with a climate crisis, a pandemic crisis, and an economic crisis, right? So we've got all this coming at us. We are in the 6th mass extinction. And this is not just environmentalists saying this. This is from the Intergovernmental Science Policy Platform on Biodiversity and Ecosystem Services, put out a nightmare report in 2019, devastating. 1 million species worldwide currently at risk of extinction within just the next few decades. So we can all watch this horror show happen. Number of birds in the United States and Canada has declined by 3 billion or 29% in 50 years. I mean, this is horrifying. So what does Trump do, right? We're in an extinction mass crisis, human cause. He gutted the Migratory Bird Treaty Act, which is a 100-year-old law. Basically, he says it just protects birds from being killed by incidental things like oil and gas or power lines. He said, nope, you can kill birds incidentally, and it just completely destroyed that law. It's NEPA, the National Environmental Protection Act, right? Kind of our front line. It's how we as citizens, as environmentalists, as environmental justice can submit comments and objections to projects, be it a highway or a hospital or a dock into the Indian River Lagoon that's going to kill seagrass and manatees. This is our way to get involved in these projects and stop them or do them better. Boom, he gutted NEPA. He's made it so that the federal government cannot respond to informal or formal consultations within 6 months. Ta-da, project gets to go forward. I mean, it's just devastating. And then there's the Endangered Species Act, one of the most popular laws to the average American, except oil and gas hates it, extraction, realtors. Regular Americans love the Endangered Species Act. So what does Trump do? Guts it. For the first time ever, if you consider listing a species on the act, you can take into consideration cost-benefit analysis. It used to just be based on science. Very rarely do species win in a cost-benefit analysis, generally because there's no benefits taken into consideration. Change the deadlines about recovery plans, which means you can't take climate change into effect. Made it easier for a consultation to move forward. That's comboed up with NEPA. And then changed critical habitat definitions. So basically get it. And a reminder too on like why wildlife is so important. In Florida, we know, right? Because it's one of our biggest economic drivers. We love nature, we love birding. It's important to our state. But this is an interesting thing. The horseshoe crab, which lives in the mid-Atlantic, they are in Florida too. It has not been listed as endangered or threatened because the government won't allow it because it's so important. The red knot, which is a beautiful bird that depends on the horseshoe crab's eggs for its survival to go around the world, is severely endangered. But what does the horseshoe crab do? It's got this metal in its blood, and it allows scientists to detect bacteria in vaccinations. And it's like a miracle thing because one of the dangerous things about vaccinations, not as an anti-vaxxer, but if there's bacteria or contamination in a vaccine, it can make you sick or kill you. So the horseshoe crab is a miracle animal because it helps us have safer vaccines. And it is literally being used to save us from COVID. So sometimes it's easy to forget the role that nature and wildlife serves. And then if you think about pollinators, they're not listing the pollinators. We're in a pollinator crisis. It's very hot and dry in here because it's freezing cold in DC right now. Anyway, and then plants, we all know in Florida, right? Mangroves, they protect us from sea level rise and storm surges. They're nurseries for fish that we love to eat that are important to our economy. So wildlife is extremely important. Like I said, we're in a climate crisis, we're in an extinction crisis, we're in a pandemic crisis, we're in an economic crisis. They're all interconnected and they all need to be addressed as soon as possible. A quickie, I just did a rough analysis of the 130 environmental rollbacks. 89 are in litigation. 17 have been ruled in favor of Trump today. You know, we don't have the best judges. I'm sure Alan's going to talk about what has happened with our judicial system, but we used to be able to go there for safety in the environmental world, and it's just not there anymore. And this, God forbid, the Supreme Court is a nightmare. 37 have been ruled against the Trump administration, but there's a ton of litigation going on. And I will say that moving forward, like Anna said, there's the executive orders have been coming out. Last week, there was one that listed a bunch of the environmental rollbacks that the Biden administration is going to reconsider, send back to the agencies, and decide what to do. Cool. He put out a really good executive order on climate change, which actually mentioned biodiversity and environmental justice, which everything about the climate, everything about these crises impacts frontline people, tends to impact people, low income, minorities, way more. So white people, corporations get rich, shareholders get rich, and wildlife, nature, and the weakest people suffer the consequences. So we put out a really good executive order, so we're thrilled about that. The problems are there's 3 ways to undo all of this horrific damage. One is the Congressional Review Act, which Trump was spectacular at using. That's how he overturned so many of Obama's initiatives so quickly. That has a lot of weird rules around it, so it's not as easy to use as people think. Of course, Trump did it, so I wish the Democrats would get it together and use it. Other is just straight up legislation. To me, I just feel like put a big bill together with all of this, wolf delisting, all these different things that they've done for public health, human health, and in the environment, and just pass it and say, let's go back to baseline, like Trump never existed. Congress, Senate, nobody I've talked to seems excited about that, but I think it would be the most awesome and fastest way to do it. And then there's litigation, and everybody's litigating everything. The problem with litigation, legislation, and even the Congressional Review Act is they take time. And every day that goes by, developers are just moving full speed ahead because it's really hard to undo something once it's been done. The leases are out there. And yes, Biden is freezing a lot of that, but a lot of damage is being done. And all of these things, litigation, lobbying, rallying people, takes so much resources and time just to put us back where we were during the Obama administration, which was not spectacular. Obama had a horrible House and Senate, if people forget. I mean, McConnell blocked everything. So we were in a really bad situation then, and the situation has become even worse. But optimistically, thank God we have Biden right now and Harris. So that's a million times better than Trump. He is already, as Anna had said too, putting in some really good political appointees. I mean, you really couldn't get much worse than Pruitt and Zinke and Bernhardt and Wheeler, which were corrupt corporate parasites, and they really damaged their agencies, the people that work there. But we have now Michael Reagan, who's going to be running EPA. He seems like a great guy. We have Deb Haaland. Okay, so she is going to be the first Native American to run the Secretary of Interior, which is pretty spectacular. I worked with her in her office so many times. She's a House member from New Mexico, and she was in the House Natural Resources Committee for years. And she did so much for the ESA. She did the best she could. I mean, in horrible circumstances of the Trump administration. So we're really, really, really excited about her. We're excited about some of her political appointees. There's like lists coming out in DC constantly about who's being nominated for what positions, how we can help, who's good, who's bad. Nobody's really bad, but who's going to be spectacular. So we have a lot of work cut out. And I just want to end with saying one thing. Just because we get a Democrat in the office doesn't mean we can back off. We don't have the time to back off. We have got to keep our foot on the gas. We have got to make sure that Biden fulfills every single one of his promises. We've got to stay politically engaged, locally, state, federal, every second of every day. I think there's a natural inclination to say the Democrats going to take care of certain things, but Biden's going to have, the Senate is so close, as we all know, right? Kamala's going to have to break every single tie. We're down to like only 4 Democrats lead in the House. We have a lot of really Democrats that are horrible on the environment on different issues. They might be spectacular on climate change, but they're terrible on public health. They might be really good on toxics, but they don't give a shit about animals. You know, like, so we have to like work all of these people. We cannot just relax because there's too many crises. There's too much work to do, and we all need to work hard.
Thank you so much, Corey. I'll tell you what, I really appreciate the fact that you're joining us from Washington, D.C. and the beautiful weather that you're enjoying up there right now. Oh, yes, if only we could go outside and roll a snowball or two and throw them, yeah, whatever. But thank you very much. It is, as you said, it is a shocking legacy that is being left behind by the monster from the Oval Office. I think the Washington Post was documenting this and making a list. I know the New York Times had a list, and it was just growing and growing and growing. All the things with regard to the environment that were being beaten down and destroyed, and it's going to take a long time to rebuild it. And it's going to be up to us, the citizens, to let our elected representatives know that this is important to us. So, as you said, the work is just beginning. Thank you again. And that leaves us the opportunity to turn toward our final speaker, Alan Grayson, three-term congressman, progressive activist, attorney, all-around nice guy who frankly has been so supportive of the Space Coast Progressive Alliance in the past. And his wonderful wife, I must say, who almost exactly a year ago came to the Space Coast Progressive Alliance and told us what was coming. She warned us about the upcoming pandemic. So my special thanks to Dina as well. But for tonight, we're lucky to have Alan. Alan, who can tell us what it's like to be on the floor of the U.S. Congress, a place that was attacked on January 6th physically. But we know that our government has been under attack for the past 4 years. And Alan, how do you see it?
Thanks. Thank you, Phil. Thank you, Bonnie. Pleasure to be back in touch with both of you. Also pleasure to hear Anna's voice and Corey's voice once again. Thank you both. It's interesting that you mentioned the attack on the Capitol from January 6th. As this was unfolding, we saw the video that was posted of the woman who got shot. And I said to my wife, I know exactly where that is. I recognize it from the painting. It's on the way to the men's room when you leave the Capitol floor. And I've passed through that door literally hundreds of times. At my age in particular, it's a frequent event. But it was chaotic, and it sort of made real the metaphorical battle that's been going on between the forces of good and evil just for one day, and brought it all home for so many people, including apparently many members of Congress. I've been watching very closely to see people's descriptions of what it was like to live through that. And I think that it affected them in a way that's going to have actual long-lasting effects, even including some Republicans. If you spoke to people who served on 9/11, in Congress, what they frequently mentioned to you is the fact that they felt like they were going to be victims. It's all about them, I guess. But whatever, there are many people who said for years afterward, that was the moment they remembered most from the time that they were in Congress, not some bill that they passed or some lobster dinner they had with a lobbyist, but rather that fear, that palpable fear that the plane that was heading for the Pentagon might actually crash into the Capitol instead, just a few miles away. And I think we'll see the same thing over time regarding January 6th and its events. I think that it has left a lot of people scarred in Congress, including both members and staff at this point. And it will be the single most unforgettable event for most of them. And I think that that will actually help, because we have to find some kind of way beyond the deadlock that we now have here. And that shared pain may turn out to be the way out of the deadlock that we have nationally right now. I think I should start with that. That seems to be the most palpable problem that we have right now. Yes, the Democrats won, and for the most part, progressives won around the country. Neo-Democrats and conservative Democrats had a very bad night in general on election night. And nevertheless, Trump and the forces of darkness nevertheless managed to win 75 million votes. As Trump frequently points out, more than any candidate other than Joe Biden for president in the history of the United States. What does that mean? Went out to breakfast this morning, went to a local diner, happened to sit with an earshot of 7 senior citizens, all white, and they were talking about how they've got Biden all figured out. It's just like Trump said, his son's on the take from China, and that's what this is really all about. He's going to sell out the country, and China, 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 and China. And what you see is that there's been enormously effective marketing of nonsense by the other side, and not just the extreme QAnon nonsense, but more plausible nonsense. And that's a mindset that many people are locked into now, that they're not going to leave. I've been litigating a case out in Kentucky for 1.5 years. From time to time, I had to fly out there to go to the courthouse, which is 2 hours away from the nearest airport, just like you'd expect in Kentucky. And so I turn on the radio, and all I hear is right-wing hate radio. They're immersed in it. Not just the white folks, but everybody who lives in Kentucky hears that stuff all day long when they're not working, and often when they are working, because a lot of places now will play that over the PA system. Particularly public places will play it over the PA system while you're trying to work. By the way, I introduced the bill to prevent that. I don't think that people should be force-fed Fox News or anything else while they're working, but that bill never went anywhere. So we're in a country that's deeply divided. 44,000 votes cast differently in 3 states would have swung the election in the other direction, thanks to our archaic and scandalous electoral college. Last time was 78,000 votes that have swung. If swung in the other direction, would have delivered the victory to the Democrats. What we clearly have now is a country that, for electoral college purposes at least, is divided right down the middle. And what that means above all is, first, that we have to fight. The Space Coast Progressive Alliance is an organization, like thousands of other organizations around the country, that has to work its patooties off every single time now, every time there's an election. Because if we don't, then the other side will just barely beat us, like they just barely beat us statewide in Florida 2 years ago. And the results will be absolutely catastrophic, as we saw for the last 4 years with Donald Trump and the last 2 years with DeSantis. And I'm talking really, really catastrophic. I'm not exaggerating. When you have 400,000 dead bodies laying around, that's a testament to catastrophe. We have seen catastrophes in the level that I never expected to see in my lifetime. And of course, the biggest ones are the health catastrophe and the economic catastrophe. So let's talk about those for a few minutes. With regard to the health catastrophe, 400,000 people died unnecessarily. Virtually all of them were avoidable deaths. In Australia, they still haven't reached 1,000 COVID deaths yet. In New Zealand, it stopped at 25, and there hasn't been a single COVID death for the past 6 months in New Zealand. These are people who basically have their stuff together, and we unfortunately do not. The clearest message from COVID was all those dead bodies, but the next clearest message from COVID was our utter, profound lack of social cohesion. When you take criminal law at Harvard, there's a saying that they relate to you that helps you to understand what you're learning about in criminal law. The saying is this: your right to swing your fist stops somewhere short of my face. Well, the same thing is true with regard to COVID. Your right to breathe stops somewhere short of my lungs. And this is a truth that goes right to the heart of the lack of social cohesion that we not only witnessed, but we had to bear for the past year in America. Where was our champion who said, stop breathing your germs on me and everybody else? Where was our champion who said, if you're not wearing a mask, that's really essentially the same as reckless driving or driving while intoxicated. You don't even know if you've got COVID or not, and that there you are breathing all around me and your own family. How many of them are going to die? We had nobody nationally who was in a visible place to make the argument that Trump and all his Trump lunatics were endangering all of us and ended up killing 400,000 of us. And once we fell behind, we never caught up. You know, and what happened in Australia, what happened in New Zealand, what happened in South Korea, what happened in Vietnam, what happened in Taiwan, places much closer to the epicenter and origin of the virus. All of these places, including China, took it seriously enough to defeat it at the beginning, before it was endemic in their countries. And what did they do? They did things that are 19th century technology, contact tracing. I think the Romans could have handled contact tracing, honestly. I don't think that that's something that required high tech. Okay, what else did they do? Quarantine enforcement. Do you know anybody who actually got COVID and was forced to quarantine? I don't. I don't know anybody who was forced to quarantine. I know a lot of people who did. I know a lot of people who didn't. But I don't know anybody who was forced to. Where was the social cohesion necessary to say, we have to take this on as a group? This is obviously something that spreads from person to person. And the only way to stop it is to exercise some degree of social control along the lines of the things that keep us from driving our cars into each other every day. Really, where was the sense, the social sense, that we needed to come together in order to fight this problem and defeat it? Now, I've heard words like that from President Biden, and I'm hopeful that people catch on. But, you know, for those 400,000 who died, it's really too late. My uncle being one of them. I wish he were still with us. So, economically, moving on, economically, we had 30 million people lose their jobs. Believe it or not, 10 million of them are still unemployed. The unemployment numbers don't reflect that. The unemployment numbers say that there's fewer than 7% of the workforce that's unemployed. They don't count the people who left the workforce. So if you look back at the numbers, you'll see that 10 million people who actually were working in America a year ago today are not working today. These are people who have left the workforce through discouragement or impracticality or otherwise. We may never in our lifetimes be able to entice them back to do the work that makes the lives of all of the rest of us livable. We are the net sum of the work that we do for each other. That is what the economy is. It's people doing work with and for other people. And we are impoverished as a nation if 10 million of us have left the workforce and are no longer providing the things that we buy from each other or the services that we provide to each other. And you know, all of this is entirely unnecessary. The COVID relief bill managed to dish out $3 trillion and more. Roughly 80% of that was corporate welfare in one form or another. Virtually everything that wasn't a cash to a human being or an unemployment check was corporate welfare. And now let's put that into perspective, okay? Let's do some math. What would it cost to actually hire those 10 million people who aren't working right now? What would it cost if we gave them all a $15 minimum wage? All right? And what would it cost if we set them to do the work to meet the needs of others, the human needs of others, whether it's helping seniors at home who want to remain independent, whether it's providing daycare to working mothers, whatever it might be. If we simply put them to work meeting the needs of others, what would that cost? Answer, $300 billion, 1/10 of the cost of the actual money that was wasted. If you look back and you do the math, you'll find that the corporate welfare elements of the bill actually did manage to put back to work 3 million people, 3 million in a country of 300 million plus. And at that time, cost more than $100,000 per job saved for 3 months. Easily the most ineffective economic bailout program ever created by any human society by a wide margin. And what's the result of that? Well, we added $4 trillion to the national debt. For those of us who are still paying attention to such things, the value of the dollar is down by 18% against all other world currencies. And we're talking about some currencies like the euro that are backed by nothing. If you took out your dollar bill and you look at it, you'll see that it says right on there, it's backed by the full faith and credit of the United States. The euro is backed by nothing. And yet, nevertheless, the euro has gone up by almost 20% this year against the dollar, as has every other major currency with whom we trade. So we've had a complete collapse of the value of the money in our pocket, which is glossed over by the fact that asset prices still remain high, thanks to the Fed basically pumping up the stock market and the real estate market. That's what passes for economic policy these days. What Trump leaves behind is very close to what Trump has left behind in every casino in Atlantic City, as well as 2 or 3 other major Trump operations. Bankruptcy, national bankruptcy in an economic sense, and also maybe also in a social sense. So where does that leave us? Well, I'm sorry to say this, but where it leaves us is the crying need for the Space Coast progressives and everyone else in the country who actually has a conscience to work as hard as we possibly can to push back on the forces of darkness. I am delighted to see that President Biden is showing that nobody's gotten into his head or the head of the people who run his administration. Before you're even elected to elective office, federal elective office, there is a major effort to get into your head. I'll give you an example of this just to prove my point. There was a congressman from Ohio named Zach Space, a fantastic name for somebody who would run in your county in Florida. But nevertheless, he ran in Ohio, big mistake. And he was elected to Congress, and he served in Congress for about 10 years. Zach Space was elected to what's called the Purple District, not quite blue, not quite red, something in between. And his days were numbered. But he figured that if he kissed NRA butt enough, that he could appeal to all the gun lovers in his district, of which there were many, and that would keep a Democrat in office in Congress. So he was the NRA's man in Congress, at least as much as any Democrat. Whenever the NRA wanted something, you heard about it from Zach Space. So what happened to Zach Space? As soon as they thought he was beatable, the NRA ran $1 million campaign against Zach Space in his own district. So we're going to have to deal with that problem, the problem of weak Democrats going forward. But it hasn't happened yet to Joe Biden, and it hasn't yet happened yet to Kamala Harris, and it hasn't happened yet to the people with whom they work. And that's very, very encouraging to me. All this whining about how you can't ignore 75 million voters, all this whining about how Joe Biden's a socialist and a China lover, all this whining about bipartisanship, which you only hear about when the other side is out of power. I don't remember seeing any of that when they were in power, at least not in most cases. In any event, this is the way they play the game, and the game is not working for them. But we can't rest. We have to work hard. We have to work our tuchus off. I think my mom may be on the line here. She knows what I'm talking about. We have to work our tuchus off each and every opportunity, whether it's an election or otherwise, because if we don't, then we fall right into that crevice. We drop 200 feet in the darkness and in the cold, and then we die. There is no alternative. This is the situation that we are in right now. We have to fight every single time. But I do think that the tide has turned. I do think that we have the advantage. And as Nancy Pelosi said to me after I was elected, and other freshmen were elected to Democrats, and we would get together each week, and she said to all of the new Democrats in 2009 in the House, if you do good things for people, you will be reelected. And one can only hope. One can only hope. But the opportunities are there. The opportunity to have a more progressive tax system is there. And I was suggesting that while we're talking about the subject of all these checks to be handed out to people, we might actually try to cut the tax burden on working people. I do not understand why every single person who works, even if they're making minimum wage, has to pay 10% of their money in income tax to the government. I don't really think that that's a good use of their money. There are other ways we could make the income tax system more progressive. With regard to healthcare, the need is obvious. We still have more than 2 million Floridians who can't see a doctor when they're sick. We did our best to reduce that, but the Republicans thwarted that. They kept $80 billion of federal aid out of the state so that they could see to it that poor people could not see a doctor when they were sick. And what price have they had to pay for that? The answer is nothing. Even the hospital lobbyists, who were absolutely furious with them that they turned down that kind of money from the federal government, have still nevertheless come around because they have the power, and the lobbyists know that. So they have to get along with them one way or another. The healthcare system is in enormous crisis. I have a family of 7. I paid more than $50,000 last year just for their insurance. That, imagine what it would have cost if one of them had been hospitalized last year. The system has become completely unaffordable for ordinary people. And with Obamacare, we did, to try to end that, was we tried to give subsidies, the affordability credits, which have actually worked out, I think, quite well. But nobody anticipated that Republicans in half the country would literally turn down free money from the federal government just for spite in order to keep 10 million people without health insurance. So it's not terribly difficult to see where we need to go. In general, the problem is inequality, whether you're talking about political inequality, social inequality, economic inequality, moral inequality, whatever it might be. That's the problem. It's easy to see how to lessen that inequality and make its effects somewhat less dramatic. That's the progressive standard. In one way or another, what we're trying to do is to make the world a better place by making sure that the little guy can reach the jam on the bottom shelf of the fridge, as Huey Long used to say in Louisiana. What we do in one form or another is trying to lessen the horrifying effects of inequality in modern day America, which just grow and grow and grow in leaps and bounds. If you have a police officer's knee on your neck because you are Black, that's inequality. If you are the President of the United States and you commit the most heinous act in the history of the presidency of the United States, and you escape the consequences of that, that's inequality. That's inequality at work, when one man is above the law. So it's clear what we have to do. It's clear that we have to try really hard to do it. I don't know if you'll find that inspiring or just really tiring, but that's the situation that we find ourselves in now. There is a clarion call to justice, justice, justice ye shall seek, whether it is justice in the form of equality, compassion, or peace, whatever it might be. Thanks very much.
Alan, that was actually very inspirational. And again, if you were in a room full of us, you know that you'd be getting a great round of applause and the love definitely would fill that room. For all of our audience, those of you that are on Zoom, you'll be able to use the Zoom function to raise your hand, and we'll be able to call on you to ask you, to let you ask questions and interact with our speakers. And of course, Corey and Alan, I think that Anna had to leave us. She had to leave early. So it's going to be up to the two of you guys to handle these first questions. And Alan, I know eventually you're going to probably have to drop offline.
Yeah, that's true, but I'm okay for now. Thank you for reminding me.
You're very welcome. Both of you, wonderful speakers and a wonderful perspective. Honestly, it is so great to have you here. Now it's our turn to ask our participants if they have any questions. And by the way, Corey and Alan, if you guys have questions of each other, you're very welcome to have a chat as well. It's important, I think, to recognize that you guys have kind of an inside skin. You've been places and seen things that the rest of us can only dream of. So you might have questions for each other. Just to start off, do either of you?
Well, sure. Corey, how was your experience running for Congress? Did it add to your life or subtract from it?
Let's see. Added to my life because I met so many people and learned a lot. And, you know, I'm on the Hill all the time begging members of Congress to do the right thing about everything. So it gave me a better perspective on how they got there. But it's really hard. And then this was years ago, before, and the trolls were bad back then, and the lying and the politics was, and it's only gotten worse. I think under the Trump years, it's just become like, I think a lot worse for people. And it's scary, right? I mean, I was on an ESA grassroots call watching the Capitol be attacked, 2 miles away from my house. And it was just like, what? We got off the call, and it was just, things have gotten really bad. But the experience of running for Congress was really fun, except for the trolling and the lies.
Corey, do you have any questions for Alan?
Yeah, Alan was on the Science and Space Committee, and I'm just curious, what do you think of Space Force?
I think it's horrible. And by the way, that's a imprudent thing to say politically. But my God, there's so many negative ads that can be run against me already. It just doesn't matter anymore. I can afford to be honest for that reason alone. As the song goes, I stand accused of the things I've said. That's a U2 song. The answer is that I think that we had agreed for half a century that space was not supposed to be militarized. And that mattered to me. I was, I think it's fair to say, one of the leading proponents of what passes for a peace movement here in this country at this point. And that was just extremely important to me. I'll tell you that when I look back on it, I never had to vote on it, but I think I was instrumental in preventing war with Syria. I think that was a major accomplishment from my own perspective. I was practically the only one who was willing to make the case against war when the President of the United States and my party was making the case for it. And I stopped the drone bombs in Pakistan for a year by holding a very, very effective news conference that embarrassed the Pakistani government into putting a halt on drone attacks for 1 year. So I was unusually active regarding matters, military matters, space matters, foreign affairs matters. I was on both committees, space and foreign affairs. And I think it's horrible. The fact is that the militarization of space creates the potential for weapons that are worse than atom bombs. I mean, as unimaginable as that may seem. If you drop a large rock from orbit and it hits the Earth, the effect is utterly catastrophic. You can put a refrigerator in orbit, and if you drop it from space, you could wipe out a small city. That's how dramatic the effect of gravity is. And we've managed to get through the first half century of the space age without anybody being that crazy until Donald Trump. Donald Trump felt that he had to break that norm like every other norm that was normal. And the result of that is we may see the situation spinning out of control. The balance of terror has been removed. The fear that the other side had that if they militarize, we'll militarize, and back and forth is now suspended because we are doing that. And it's interesting. I've talked to these people. They're not even sure what they're doing. What they're doing, in essence, is conjuring up a threat that doesn't now exist in the hope that it might exist in the future. They're saying that the foreign governments could attack us from space, therefore we have to attack them from space. It's a Dr. Strangelove line that I thought we'd put behind us, but we apparently have not. So I find it extremely, extremely disturbing. And I hope that Biden will quietly kill that particular branch of the military in the crib.
Dwight Eisenhower is spinning in his grave. Probably one of the most important military leaders of the past century. Dwight Eisenhower, when he became president, focused on the whole concept of plowshares to peace, and he was instrumental in saying that we should never militarize space, and we should keep it as the final frontier, a peaceful place. Honestly, I don't think a lot of people know their history and understand why that is so important. But yeah, I think you're right on. Do we have any questions yet? Daniel, I don't know if Daniel...
Yes, we've had some technical problems with the raise hand option. So we do have Christine and Larry that have questions, as well as DP. So they have the ability to unmute themselves.
DP, why don't you go first?
I've just got a quick one from Facebook. Somebody asked, is Marjorie Taylor Greene the future of the Republican Party?
Ooh, who would like to take that one?
I'll take it. Then we can hear from Corey afterward if she wants. But the answer is yes. The Republican Party is being systematically taken over by lunatics. And I was actually engaging in satire when I said the Republican healthcare plan is don't get sick. And if you do get sick, die quickly. But now it's true. It really is true. We saw that all last year. In any sort of battle between lunatics and moderates for the hearts and minds of a polity, the lunatics often win. Look at the historical analogies. In this particular case, the lunatics are backed by a massive money machine. The funders of the Republican Party are ideological themselves. The My Pillow guy, as crazy as he may seem, is the typical big Republican donor. That's where they're at this point. What Wall Street and the traditional sources of funding for the Republican Party are willing to put up at this point is really just drop in the bucket compared to what a person like Greene can raise and deploy and use for her advantage. There's never any shortage of money in the Republican Party under any circumstances. But what's happened is that it's Gresham's law in effect. The bad drives out the good, not just in terms of money, which is what Gresham's law originally applied to, but also in terms of politics. It's going to get worse. It's going to get worse and worse and worse. And there is no effective way to internally discipline people in the Republican Party. If there were, it would have happened already. It's completely impossible. I mean, does anybody think that Greene cares about whether she's serving on these committees or not? Why would she? What would be the point of it? In effect, being removed from a committee, if you're a minority member of that committee, in the minority politically, is almost as bad as being on the committee. I managed to work my way past that. I passed more amendments in bills before both of my committees than anyone else on the committee by a wide margin, even though I was a Democrat and the committees were controlled by Republicans. But I had this sort of quirky thing. I kept coming with good ideas they couldn't say no to. I don't think Greene's going to be really doing that very much. She probably regarded this committee work as hopelessly boring and a complete waste of time. So they're going to punish her by taking it away from her? I don't think so. I don't think so. They're just making her into a martyr. So this phenomenon, I think, will unfortunately grow and grow and grow, and will, be left with the shambolic remains of a political party rather than a real political party on the right.
And Corey, I'll bet you have some thought about Jewish space lasers that are triggering brush fires in California as opposed to global climate change.
I would agree with Alan. I would just add that I don't think she even knows what committees do, right? I mean, it's not a punishment. It's giving her all her free time, and it's insane. And until the Republicans call out all these lies, until Mitch McConnell or Trump or somebody that they trust and respect says that this is chronic lies and insane, then no, I agree with Alan, Grace. It's going to keep going bigger and bigger. It's not going to go away. And these little nods and winks that McConnell does that, oh, we're sort of upset by, but we're really not. I mean, the impeachment is going to tell us a lot about what happens. I feel like it's going to not go well for the Democrats. I don't know why, but Trump is like this blessed person. He's going to end up walking away. I don't even know, looking more like a hero. So what I try to focus my time on, and I think other people should, because we can't change their minds once you're a progressive and you talk about science or compassion or equality, they just tune out. They don't want to hear you. You're a liar and crazy, right? Is do things like working on statehood in DC. If we can get, and Biden has promised and the Senate has promised, we're going to get a vote for statehood, which would give us 2 senators and a House member. So we can start to try to regain the balance and equality of representation in our country. Working on HR 1, which is a bill that's trying to make it, it's kind of like the next civil rights bill, like all the ways that the Republicans have been making it difficult and suppressing the votes. We'll clear that up and make things more national. We then just try to get more Democrats out to vote on every single level, because we're not going to be able to beat their crazy. We just have to outnumber them with sanity.
Oh boy, that's a little note to pause to think about. By the way, for both Alan and for Corey, we always like to leave, we're not ready to end yet, but I just wanted to start thinking about something. We always like to leave our audience with action items, something that we want our audience to do. There's no point in sitting here and watching and listening and learning if you don't do something about it. I always like to tell people that if you leave our event and don't talk to your neighbor, don't talk to your friends, don't tell them what you've learned tonight, then we've wasted our time, really. What we need is something that people can do, something that everyone can take with them. So I'm going to ask you to, we'll discuss it, Alan, before you leave. We want to make sure that we've got your action item, and Corey, certainly an action item from you. What do you want people to do? People that are watching us. Alan, I know you said we're going to have to fight. But I'd like to have some concrete things that people can do. But just keep that to yourself for right now. But let's be thinking about what action item you'd like to leave us with tonight. I know, Christine, you've had your hand up for a while. You'd like to ask a question?
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Thank you very much, guys. Speakers have been stellar. Really have been a little depressed about the non-sugar-coated reality. However, that was just what I want to do. Perfect segue is to say, okay, time's ticking, and even with the COVID, people can do, what can we do? I feel that I love to have education and what the reality is, but I just don't want to sit here and do nothing, because that just makes me go absolutely bat crazy, especially with on the cusp of the election. I just had to get out there and do silly canvassing. It might not have had any impact at all for helping the registered Democrats to get to the polls, but I had to do something. If I sit here, I feel like I'm spinning my wheels, and then really going mental, thinking that, the other guys won. So it maybe could Corey or Alan just give a little bit of synopsis? I would be even willing to drive to Tallahassee to be with the other people in witnessing. We need to protest. We need to show, I mean, that's not for everybody, but since I'm really desperate to figure out what is a good plan of action.
A great question. Alan went first last time. Corey, would you like to take it first this time?
Sure. I'm totally an activist by nature. I like to go to the streets. I went door to door in North Carolina this last election. I can't sit at home. I mean, safe, pandemic safe, 6 feet away, masked up. So it kind of depends on, like, in Florida, it's a little tricky because it's a difficult state. I would say things like, we are working on a bill called the Preventing Future Pandemics Act, which no one has even considered yet, right? That the next pandemic is coming. If it was, as most scientists believe, a zoonotic disease that the virus jumped from one species to another species to a human, the most dangerous viruses, just like SARS and MERS and Ebola and AIDS. And we've had so many of these viruses in the last 50 years, and they just keep getting worse, right? And the scientists are saying this is just a preamble for what's coming next. So we're working on legislation to stop the wildlife trade and to start taking into consideration the role that wildlife plays in viruses. It was introduced by Senator Cornyn, Senator Booker, in the House. It's bipartisan. Anyway, we're doing lobby days coming up. I would love any Floridians, anybody on this call, if you guys want to come and participate, all you have to do is tell Rubio and tell Rick Scott how the pandemic has affected you. And as a senator, it would be kind of cool if you tried to prevent the next one. I mean, I'm so frustrated. I hate to say this, but our senator's inability to protect us from anything or put our needs or health or mental health or economy first. But anyway, we're doing that. So if anybody wants to get involved, we can put I'll put my email, my work email in the chat. I'm like the same way. And when I take action and I do things, I feel better, I feel less depressed, and we live in very depressed times. And then there's also ways to help with getting DC statehood, getting H1 passed. Because again, these are all acts of democracy. We've got to strengthen our democracy, or we're going to be at the mercy of these nutbags.
And I know that many people think that a phone call or a letter isn't really that effective, but it really is, isn't it? I mean, the more that members of Congress feel the pressure, if the numbers are going up, if their aides are taking more messages on a topic, they take note of that. If their name appears in a letter to the editor, it gets their attention. And I know that their staff is programmed to monitor for that sort of thing. Alan, how do you respond to Christine? She wants action. She wants something.
First, I want to commend you because particularly in Florida, most people just don't care about that. I remember in the year 2000, I went to the Florida Mall, which is paradigmatic because it's called the Florida Mall. And I walked through the parking lot on the Saturday before the election. So we're talking 3 days before the election. And I saw two bumper stickers in that entire experience. Went inside wearing a political t-shirt. I think you know which shirt I was probably wearing. And, got a lot of kind of dirty looks from people. So it's clear to me that at least in where we live, the number of people who care about politics and its effect on our lives, it's much smaller than the number of people who care about college football. And that's just the way it goes. I mean, people can care about whatever they want to care about. But you have this special gift called insight and empathy and a sense of the human experience and how it can be improved. And that makes you special. So you should give free rein to it. Now, it turns out that particular skill set is very much in demand and highly rewarded with electoral victories. We could never have done what we did last November, except for the fact that millions of people like you felt the way that you did and acted accordingly. The texts that were sent, the doors that were knocked on, the telephone calls that were made, the contributions that were made to candidates, and so on. These things were what made our side victorious in large parts of the country and nothing else. The other side basically had their emperor with his bread and circuses minus the bread program, giving them all the circuses they wanted. And that motivated them. And on our side, we had what? I mean, we didn't really have a hypnotically charismatic candidate, no disrespect intended. He did have my son on his lap for 20 minutes once on Air Force Two, so I'm not going to criticize him. And so on. What did we have? We had you. We had you, and that that was enough to win. And that's what we're going to need every single time. And there are different ways to do it. I mean, right now we're not in sort of the heat of an election. There are already campaigns underway because that's just the way campaigning is structured in this country. There are any number of campaigns going on right now for 2022. There's probably a few for 2024 that I haven't heard about, but they're out there. So you can always involve yourself in a campaign. But in addition to that, or separate from that, there are effective lobbying strategies. I think the best I've seen so far is that of the Progressive Democrats of America. They constantly organize visits to local offices from members of Congress, and then occasionally over longer terms, visits to Washington, D.C. offices. But these people find it very difficult to say no. That's true whether you're a congressman or a state representative or a state senator or a county commissioner. If a group of people larger than 3 want to come to your office and sit down with you, it's very hard to say no, no matter what they call themselves. And they'll listen. They may, pretend to listen, but they have no choice. They don't have earplugs on. They'll listen to what you have to say. And I think that, again, the Progressive Democrats in America were extremely effective in that regard, a genuine national grassroots organization. And there are other ways to do this too. When I was in Congress, every congressman had a weekly report on phone calls. What were they about? What were people saying? It was a weekly report that was handed to us by the staff. Everybody did that. Same thing with faxes, although nobody sends faxes anymore. But in the old days, you had fax reports weekly. And email reports. Of course, emails are the way that things usually get handed off to, congressmen these days. And so there's a weekly report on emails that gets sent in. Each one of those efforts will result in some kind of tangible impact on a congressman's sensorium in the next 7 days. And if you show up and you actually get a group of folks together to go and talk to them, you can do more than that. So it's really not as hard as people seem to think. It's true that the astroturfing has become pervasive, and fake political calls are now very common, but you can't fake showing up. So I recommend that. Give that a try and see if it works for you.
And I would imagine the T-shirt you had on was Dorothy Grayson for Congress. Is that it?
Well,
must have been.
That's still premature.
And I see
that would be premature then, and still premature, just like I was, right, Mom?
Oh, she's listening. She is. And Larry, you are our next question. Larry Abdullah.
Okay, our October program was called Edge of Authoritarianism. And I think a lot of us can see how close we came with the hundreds of House members voting against an obviously fair election. And, well, of course, many of those 74 million. So my question is, how much risk do you think there still is? And what's happening, if we can talk a little bit about the DOJ and what's happening in the legal front as far as getting justice, not only maybe against this president, some of those people that are opposed to democracy that are serving in our House. What do you think our options are?
Who wants to take that one first?
Good
It looks like
Corey.
Corey's.
I want to hear what Alan has to say this. I would just say that in the environmental community, when we have to meet with senators and House members and their staff all the time, we're really struggling with this because it's like, do we say you're a seditionist? Like you're anti-American, like you don't even respect science. You don't even respect the truth. How are we supposed to have a legitimate adult conversation about these concerns? So yeah, we're really struggling with how we're going to move forward. Like I said before, I'm really worried about this impeachment kind of blowing up and somehow Trump walking away more of a hero to his people, like victimized, he was victimized by I don't know what's going to happen with that. So in the judicial system, like the courts is again where most of a lot of environmental issues get resolved. And I'm really worried about what's happened with the judges. The Supreme Court is a nightmare. So yeah, we are safer because we have Biden and Harris, and the Congress is way better, but still it's so close. So I appreciate those concerns, Larry. I don't see a smooth path out. Like I keep saying, DC statehood, HR, we've got to protect voter rights so that we can have more progressive voices, but I would be eager to hear what Alan would say.
Well, it wasn't a fair election. It's just that the other side tried to steal it instead of us. And that's the way the other side operates. Whatever it is that they have in mind, they accuse you of first in order to inoculate themselves. That's the one disease they can inoculate everybody against, understanding just how bad they really are. So we had a president who tried to decapitate the post office, knowing that most Democratic ballots would be delivered via the post office. We had a president who battered the media when the media was trying to report on what was going on. The Republicans filed more than 100 lawsuits before the election, trying to twist and turn turnout results. For instance, to give you an example, preventing people from registering when the state legislature had given them more time to register because of COVID, and so on. I mean, every single election since I moved to Florida more than 20 years ago, the Republicans in one way or another have tried to steal it. Every single one. So I don't think that's going to change. What happens is that the means change. Okay, nobody conceived of the possibility that the president would put in charge a postmaster general who would actually physically remove the mail sorting machines from mail sorting facilities. Think about what that means. Okay, and you know, to the extent they have power, they'll keep trying to do it. I'm sure that DeSantis has already come up with his wish list for 2022 about how to suppress the black vote in Florida, or just more generally the Democratic vote. It's going to happen. We just have to do what we always do: be on our guard and fight back to the best of our ability. I mean, there was so much emphasis by the other side on how to steal the election this time that you'd have to be a fool to have missed it. And therefore, people were on their guard and they were making absolutely sure that their votes did get counted. In my case, I took my ballot over to a mail drop that was actually run by the supervisor of elections and put my ballot in that box. I thought that's decent. You know, I don't have to wait online to do that. And I can just, I think I'm confident. I have confidence in that method. But we're just going to have to join the new reality, which is we're going to have to make sure that our votes count and the votes of people who are out loud with us are counted as well, no matter what the other side comes up with. And
Corey has put her email address on the chat room, and that's cwestbrook@endangered.org. Alan, I'm not sure if you would like to have some way for people that are on this event to contact you as well. But and I know that your time may be getting...
Sure. My email address is grayson@graysonlaw.net. Make sure you don't write to grayson@graysonlaw.com, because that's the law firm of specialized in funeral law. The old joke between us is that we take care of the living at graysonlaw.net, and they take care of the dead.
Phil, we have a couple more questions from Ryed and Karen.
And Alan, I don't know what your timeline is like. Do you know how many more minutes you?
3 more minutes. 3 more minutes.
Can you give us a quick action item?
Okay. The action item is very simply this: remain involved in whatever way that you find comfortable yourself. We all have to find our own personal style. I was not elected to anything in the first half century of my life. And then I realized that I was upset enough about the war in Iraq to try to run for a job where I could actually do something about it. And that's what led me to run for office if you feel like running for office. Help other candidates if you feel like helping other candidates. Contribute to campaigns if you feel like doing it. Do it because it's meaningful to you, and you feel right. You feel good about it. You feel like you're doing something that involves you in something that's larger than yourself, which it is. I mean, the progressive cause goes back thousands and thousands of years. We are just basically foot soldiers in an army that stretches from the beginning of time to the end of time. And what we try to do is we push as best as we can in any way that we can to make the world a better place, the greatest good for the greatest number, and justice, equality, and peace. So that's my action item for everybody. Think about the thing that you feel like doing that's most effective in making the world a better place. It may not even be in politics. You know, I feel pretty good petting my dog. But whatever that is, do it. Then don't just think about it, do it. And that's my urgent advice to all of you.
And can I take 30 seconds and give Raed, our president, one last question? He's got a question before you.
Well, I know I'm trying to, I know he gave us the action item, but I was trying to, our program is called Moving Forward. And we all know that this country is divided. And we have a lot of, misconceptions on both sides, progressive, socialist, but we need to move as a country. We need to take this undivisiveness and we can't just keep alienating ourselves far left, far right. And as progressives, I know we have a bad name lately. They tried the one on the right, and now we're calling them the far right. How can we move forward as a country? That's the main question that I have for the night.
I don't have a good answer for that. I'll tell you that I passed more laws than any other member of Congress, even though I was a member of the party that was not in power. I was a Democrat, and there's nothing more powerless than being a member of the minority in the House of Representatives. It's negative power. It's not even like a positive number. But what I did in my case was I found things that made enough sense so that I could get enough Republican support to win. And I'll give you an example. I passed a boatload of reforms of veterans' health care. Why? Because it's health care, and because since it was for veterans, the Republicans couldn't say no to it. They just couldn't say no. And there's a lot of things that I was able to do that way. Sometimes, by staying up until 2 o'clock in the morning, then going on the floor at 2 o'clock in the morning when everyone else is already gone and getting my amendment passed. That was an interesting experience, which I did more than once. But in any event, you find a way to try to bridge the gap. But whatever it is, it's not foundational. I never could find a way to make the Republican members of the Science Committee think that they were on the Science Committee and not the Religion Committee. I never found a way to do that. As well as I did with them, I passed more than half of all the amendments that passed on the Science Committee, even though I was on the losing end of every party line vote. As well as I did on that committee, I could never find a way to sort of make them come out of their loop, their crazy nonsense loop.
It's politics. I think it's politics.
I don't think there is a way. I think if there were a way, I would know about it. The only thing that I could make sure of at this point is that in every case where we can win, we do win. That's all that I can do. In the 121 laws that I passed in 4 years in Congress, every one of those was a win for us. Every single one of those was, in some sense, progressive legislation. And that I still feel that way. That's all that you can do. We cannot change them into us. I spent enough time with them to understand that. In fact, to be honest, some of them were really my friends. I actually liked a lot of these Republicans, and I definitely understood where they were coming from. They're not us, we're not them, but we still have to win because the fate of mankind literally hangs in the balance. There is no compromise between life and death. There is no middle ground. There is no way to bring back those 400,000 dead people who died last year because of Trumpian malice and incompetence and self-indulgence. There is no way to do that. When we win, people live, people survive, people reach their potential as human beings. And when they win, the opposite happens. So I wish I had a better answer for you. That's the only answer I've got.
Thank you. Thank you, Congressman. Thank you, Corey. Thank you, Anna. I think this was a great program. We wish we have more time to get a lot more questions in, but I'll send it back to Phil. I think you guys just represented our voices the best we can tonight.
Thank you all. Thank you all for doing exactly what I said. Just being here means that you're involved. Thank you.
Alan, you really are so important to us, and I thank you very much for that. And our program is not coming to an end at this moment, folks. We still have Corey, who can continue to answer some of our questions, specifically from her perspective. And she has been on the floor of Congress. She has been in the halls of Congress. She knows what it's like to work with people who really, really don't want to talk to you. She knows what it's like to walk in and to deliver a message that people don't want to hear. And I think you've been pretty, Corey, I think you have a pretty good success rate at convincing people at least to listen to you. And Daniel, what was you were going to say? I
was just going to mention that we have Karen who has a question, and then followed by Larry.
Very good. Karen, you're up next for Corey Westbrook.
Okay, so here the thing is, I was trying to catch Anna before she left, and as well as Alan. The problem that we're having, my day job is labor. I don't know if Corey can help me out on this or not, but the Florida legislature right now, I don't know how much sunshine is flowing through. Where it's very difficult to do some of the things that we were able to do in the past, and so I was trying to get in time enough to ask someone who's been there, done that, what would be the most effective way for us to make a difference here in this session this year. That's what I was trying to get in. And I noticed Alan said about weekly phone calls. He had a report on that every week. We're scratching our heads now because it's difficult to get up to even speak now in committee meetings and all. So that was my question. What's most effective right now?
Aaron, I would say I'm not as familiar with Tallahassee and the state legislature, but I will say this, that since we've all witnessed this hell on earth that was Trump and the destruction of everything that we care about, I have never seen coalitions come together like in the past. Like it used to be a little bit of friction between unions and the environment because somebody had convinced people that we were in opposition to each other. That narrative does not exist anymore. I have never seen coalitions, the Climate Crisis Coalition, led by the NAACP, the Enviros, in DC, people were joining forces and just like circling the wagons instead of shooting at each other. So I hope that's what's happening in Tallahassee, but Florida is such a difficult state, it's so racist and it's so backwards in so many ways. I mean, they're just destroying their own environment, right? Yet it's their most important economic driver for tourism. It makes no logical sense. So I sympathize. So I hope the same thing is happening. And I would just add that just reaching out and working together is things are changing up here. And I hope they're going to change down there. And I wish I could give you more advice on the daily. Oh, I was going to say this, the Zoom meetings, right? So in the past, we would chase members of Congress, chase senators in the streets, book meetings, do all the stuff that Alan was saying, because it's true. Like once there's 2 or 3 or 4 of you that are voters in their office, they kind of have to come and take a picture and you can talk to them. Zoom meetings, we can Zoom in, 300 activists to a Rubio meeting. And because people don't have to, it's easier in some ways, right? It's less expensive. People aren't leaving their work. They can take an hour break or a half an hour break. So in a weird way, we're doing a lot, even though it's a pandemic that maybe we couldn't do before. So maybe it's the same thing with Tallahassee. We get like union or any people from across the state to organize a Zoom meeting, and then they have to listen to you, hopefully.
I wonder if Bill Posey actually would consider having a Zoom meeting to allow his constituents to talk to him. Probably not. It's too scary.
I would be intrigued to know that because I'm just like, oh my God, Posey never meets with anybody, right? I mean, he doesn't meet with progressives. So, but that would be interesting because a Zoom meeting is so easy. It's not like you can be, whatever, he's an idiot. You know how I feel about Posey.
Oh, indeed. And Karen, while we've got you, is there anything that you would like to tell our audience? Does the AFL-CIO have a need for us to support you, or is there a message that you would like to get out to our audience tonight?
He's muted.
Absolutely. We always try to work with community, and that's why I'm right here in the SCPA. We started out. I joined up with the with the Progressive Alliance because we were working within the community. We're coming with different ideas because, like I said, it's a different world up there now. But here on the ground, we're going to do in-district visits. We're going to try to do some letter campaigns, car caravans. It would be wonderful if we had car caravans stretching from one end of the county to the other. It'll get attention, it'll get media coverage. And I will reach out to all the different organizations that we're involved with, as well as with SCPA, since I'm part of it. And try my best to get whatever we can, because, we have some legislation right now that's anti-union, that's anti-everything, get-together, whatever the word I'm trying to say. But anyway, yeah, there are things that we could do together, and I will be reaching out to everybody that I know, different organizations to help out. So look out for me. We will be doing that.
Good. Karen has been serving on our board for years, and this year is serving as our vice president. So we thank you, Karen, for your service to our organization. A big round of applause and good hugs for you in all that you do. And, of course, for all of our members, pay attention, because when the AFL-CIO reaches out, we'll try to pass that on to you so that you can help. Because what's good for the working men and women of America is good for America, right? So thank you so much, Karen. We have another question. Daniel, I think?
We had Larry and then Bonnie.
Bonnie, you have the floor for Corey Westbrook.
I'm wondering about boycotting a place of business. Right now, there's talk about boycotting Publix, which would be hard for us to do, but to actually make a campaign of doing that, because they she made donations to the meeting that led to the insurrection. What do you think about that kind of action? And I'm wondering if our own members are interested in doing that kind of thing.
Yeah, I'm a total supporter of boycotts, because I feel like where we spend our money is how we say whether we think behavior is acceptable or not acceptable. It's and they've worked in different ways, and in some ways they don't. But again, that kind of goes back to the narrative, like I was saying with Karen, where people will tell you immediately boycotts don't work. And it's, if you look back, who's telling you boycotts don't work? The corporations. They'll always put out things, boycotts don't work immediately. I mean, I remember having people repeating to me oil and gas talking points about why boycotts don't work. And I'm like, thanks, the cutoff it's just crazy how good they are at grabbing the messaging. I think that with Publix, if enough people did it, they would change a policy. Because I know that woman, I think she owned like 8%, and then Publix is a little bit tricky because it's also employee owned. So people immediately were saying you'll hurt the employees as well as the rich person. But try to kind of find out what the truth is, and like do a fact sheet and get people to sign on and say, I'm not going to shop in Publix until we get a commitment that this woman never donates political money again, or something along those lines, so that there's like a specific ask. And it's Publix. I mean, they are sensitive to the community, right? I mean, that's the whole reputation, right? Is it the most polite grocery store in America or something? So you could probably finesse it right and get some permanent action. Even not just a threat of a boycott, but man, when that was going on Facebook, people were freaking out. People were like defending, I only have Publix, and it's some raw nerves. But it would be definitely you should consider fleshing out, finding out how it can work. Maybe it's only a few strategic Publixes, just enough to put the pressure on and to stop this kind of behavior. Because it's true, like, why would you go into a grocery store and give them your money so that they can fund an act of war against our democracy? I mean, that's insane. And if it's even just laying it out like that, Publix should be tripping over itself to apologize and make sure that never happens again.
I can tell you that I've had some very interesting discussions with the manager of my local Publix. You know, we shop there a lot, and whenever something comes up, I see, you know, money being sent to Ron DeSantis, I'll go in and talk to them directly and let them know how much that concerns me. And I'll tell you what, I don't know what that does, but I'll tell you what, a face-to-face, even though we may have to be wearing masks these days, it really rings their bell. I mean, you're taking the time from their day to have them come over to the desk to talk to you about an issue that's important and let them know that, hey, I shop here all the time and have for many years, and I thank you for supporting us. But the essence is they've got to listen. You know, they call it voting with your wallet, right? So, Bonnie, did you have a follow-up, Bonnie?
I'm fine. I appreciate that. I am going to look into it as best I can.
Larry, your hand is still up on your display. Do you have another question, Larry?
I do. Yeah, and thanks, Corey, for your complete coverage of the environmental and interior. It was really illuminating. You know, we would not be where we are with electric cars if it wasn't for California. So I'm really stunned to see that they've lost their ability to have their own air and water pollution standards, and that through that legal fight that the Trump administration was able to take them away from them. What does it take to get it back? And what does it take, another issue, to have a Clean Power Act? I see Corey's muted.
Yeah, that goes back to the thing where there's an evaluation now on, is it better or can we use legislation or litigation? Both of those passed too fast, and they were passed using the Congressional Review Act. So the Clean Air Act one from California was not, but the power plant rule was, and that makes it really tricky because technically you're never allowed to pass another law or another rule that is anything like the Congressional Review Act. Is that not the most stupid thing? Congress passes some really stupid things. So we're trying to evaluate what exactly that means. And then we're gonna run right into the Trump appointed judges, right? So it's very tricky. I'm not a clean air expert, but I know there's brilliant people working on that issue because it is enormous. Like I said, people used to say, so goes California, so goes the country. They would drag Georgia and Florida and Arkansas along crying and, well, I don't want electric cars, you know, like it's just, and Michigan, right? So it needs to be restored, and I hope that they can find a way. So it depends on how Trump gutted a law, depends on how we can restore it. And again, the thing that sucks is all of these things take so much time when we really don't have time. I mean, we are in an environmental crisis, pandemic crisis. It's really horrible, but I totally agree. And as soon as I find out which angle they're going to choose on the Clean Air Act, California, or the robots power plants, which is hugely important. Now, you know, Biden might just do a new huge entire global warming bill that just sucks in all of that. I kept saying that, just do that, just pass enormous legislative bills. It's just so tricky. Like, we have to manage Manchin, and we have to manage Sinema, because these are the two Democrats who, you know, and I feel like just give Manchin whatever he wants. Does he want $50,000 a year for every single person in his state to never have to work again so we can save the lives of the world? Give it to them. You know what I mean? Like let's open our minds about what we're capable, because that's what he's going to want, right? He pretty much blackmailed people on the Obamacare. Fine, who cares, right? Luckily, West Virginia is a very small populated state, but we just have to start thinking outside the box. And Democrats are really good at negotiating with themselves and then saying, well, historically, it had to be done like this, but the Republicans don't play by those rules. So we kind of have to start thinking a little bit more creatively and with urgency.
Wow, it's interesting to hear how difficult it is now. Yeah.
And by the way, for those of you that are still with us, if you go to the chat, you can see that Karen Houston has left her contact information for anybody that's interested in helping with labor activities. Karen's got her phone number, her email. Paul Halpern raised a very interesting question of saying that if we boycott Publix, it may not result in them changing their politics, but they'll have less of our money to donate to the bad guys. And that's an interesting thought, is if I don't give you my money, you can't give it away to people that I disagree with. There are many people, of course, that the question of boycotting Home Depot versus Lowe's and that kind of thing. If you haven't, by the way, for those of you that are interested in boycotts, go look up that one online. It's a very interesting debate and discussion about the power of your home repair centers. Thank you, Larry. Thank you for that question. Do we have any other questions cooking right now? Anybody else?
We don't have any other questions, but just a reminder, Phil, that we had decided at our last meeting that we would take everyone off of mute, or ask them to come off of mute and do a round of applause before we end the program.
Excellent. Well, I'll tell you what, that's hopefully going to be a couple more minutes from now. I'd love to take the privilege of asking my own question of Corey, and that is, I'm big electric vehicles, talking about electric cars. I've been an electric car fan for many years. You know that the solar power is a big deal for me. I had the free public disclosure for everybody. I was a supporter of Corey, and we wound up over at the Florida Solar Energy Center to get the most amazing briefing from the director over there in our own backyard. We have the most amazing facility, research, educational facility, the Florida Solar Energy Center on the campus of Eastern Florida State College and the University of Central Florida in Cocoa. If you've never been over there, they don't have a big visitor center, but it is a visitor center. The facility itself is worth visiting, and maybe get a chance to talk to somebody. If you're thinking about solar power, or you're interested in even a little bit, they're a wonderful resource. Both human beings there in the facility and their online facility. It's FSEC. They also support solar vehicles and battery development. But Corey, we're watching something happen that I have never seen. I've been a big EV guy for years and years and years. Driven, we got like the first Prius, and then like the Volt, and now we've got a Tesla. These vehicles are amazing. They're good for the planet, but they're good for us as individuals. I'm watching something happen that I've never seen before, and that is the auto industry has gotten the message. Okay, Trump's gone, and now let's get on board the Biden train. And I'll tell you what, they have backed away from the lawsuit against California. They, Mary Barra, the chairman or chairwoman of CEO of General Motors, has said they're going all electric within the next 15 years, which is pretty radical. Many other car companies are making those commitments. Today, I just read an article that said that Amazon, within the next year, this is by next year, they're dedicated to having 10,000 electric delivery trucks, and within the next several years, they will have 100,000 all electric delivery trucks on the road for Amazon. There's a lot of really interesting stuff happening in the EV world. Do you have your hand on the pulse of this? What are your inputs, your thoughts with regard to advancement of electric vehicles and the impact that will have on our climate specifically?
Huge impact, huge. And I will say a few things that I think that are happening. And you touched on it. Tesla is saying they're going to put out an electric vehicle next year. Tesla says a lot of things. That's going to be like 20 grand. I think the American public is now accepting that electric vehicles cost less to maintain over the lifetime of the car, that they are obviously less expensive with gas. So I think Americans be convinced that, you have to have a combustible engine cheaper. And the minute Americans are like, wait a minute, you're getting a deal over there. I feel like it's the same thing with solar panels. I've had solar panels on my house for 10 years. And I keep telling people they paid themselves off in a few years. I don't have electricity this summer. I've been in the slush fund of money because I get SRECs in DC. We get SRECs. I get $1,000 a year for having them up. So I'm like, why doesn't everybody do this? And people look cynical, like that sounds to be true. But I feel like the more people that do it, that all of a sudden it's be like, you're almost like not that bright for not having solar panels on your roof, And I keep telling people, if you've got the extra money, not solar panels on your kids or your parents' house or something. Here you have to lease. You can't really buy them anymore because we don't make them solar panels in the United States, which I hope Biden, brings that industry back again. But it's the same thing with electric vehicles. They are better cars than combustion engines. And now that people are starting to realize it, you see Debbie Stabenow, the senator from Michigan, saying, we're going to go all electric vehicles. And then, but we do still have to worry about where the energy source comes from, right? Because mansions going to be our coal that's going to put the electricity in the house so you can fill your car up with it. Well, no, we got to start putting solar panels up, and we got to put winds. And I will say this too. This infuriates me about. Oh my God, it's consumerism. If we just do our own things, buy your electric vehicles, put your solar panels on your road, stop eating meat, this will change the world. There's no way Biden, even the Paris climate says, encourage, ask, help. It doesn't say do. You can't tell an American to do anything. We learn that with the masks, right? I have the right to kill you and no one does anything. So we need to encourage people to do things by showing them that electric vehicles are just cooler, fun, cheaper to maintain, better vehicles. I like not having an electricity bill in the summer. Wouldn't a Floridian enjoy that? It's just crazy to me how we can do these things, and we don't really need laws. We can influence the market by what we choose and buy. I am excited that they're going to infuse some money back into development, and that the auto industry is finally saying, oh God, the world is changing. But it's been because of people like you, Phil, who bought the cars early. I have a Prius that's 20 years old. I can't wait to get an electric. But my rule is you can't retire a car until it's done. But how about that? How about the fact that Priuses last 20 years? They never told us that when we first got them. They're an amazing car. I'll take a deep breath. But yeah, I'm very excited about that.
Yeah, interesting enough, my sister is driving the Prius now. She's on the meeting right here watching as we're saying this. But that Prius has 250,000 miles on its original set of brakes, by the way. When you talk about electric vehicles requiring little maintenance, it's true. And forgive me for babbling on about it, but it really is something that I think most people just don't understand until you drive one. And that's when people get that aha moment. It's like, oh, that's what they've been talking about. Do we have any more questions? I think we have time for maybe one quick one, but otherwise, do you see any, Daniel?
No, I do not.
DP, do you have anything coming in off of Facebook?
I'm sorry, Carol is raising her hand.
Oh, just a quick question on that. Any chance that they're going to give the federal rebates on buying electric cars for companies that are cars that are already over their rebates, such as Tesla?
It would be nice. I mean, there's money coming out. They're doing this reconciliation package right now, which is they're doing a vote around. It's going to be like 100 amendments. This is the get money back into people so that people can feed themselves and pay their rent and not end up homeless. The next reconciliation package, and they can do 2 this year, which is a pretty big deal because it's not always going to do 2. We were hoping that that's going to be stimulus. So that's going to be putting people back to work. That's going to be like for jobs, we're hoping that are going to be like outside. You can build wildlife corridors. They're good for wildlife. They're good for long term. They're good for humans. They're pandemic friendly jobs. There's a lot more creativity and projects that are going to have win-win-wins. I think that'll be in the next package. So hopefully we'll see that, and it would include that. However, I know that they hit those caps so fast, right? Like people were like, oh, they could only sell like 50,000 Teslas with them, and bam, people will be on a waiting list for 2 years to get their Tesla with their rebate. So we do need more. But at some point also, and I will say this, it's a little bit, I mean, people say that those rebates are for wealthy and middle class people, and that's unfair, right? We should be rebating people that are low income so that they can get into the solar panel and the energy world. So there are debates about it. It is a nice incentive, and I hope it will be included in the next package.
It's important to point out that what exists now is not actually a rebate, but it is a tax credit. And the reason that it's a tax credit is that Republicans hate taxes. And so in order for them to get buy-in, it had to be issued as a tax credit. Democrats are much more likely to be giving a cash incentive or direct payment. And to answer Carol's question, I can tell you that I have personally read that is a proposal that's currently that the Biden team is floating, and I think that is going to happen. Something like that is going to happen in legislation, perhaps within the next year. Direct stimulus, direct economic payments. And the reason that that's going to happen is that GM and the other car manufacturers are now getting on board that they're going to ramp up their EV production, and they're going to want to have the government providing cash incentives for people to buy their cars. So I suspect that's going to happen, and sooner than we think. It is time for you, Corey, to give us your action item. What would you like people to do as they leave this event?
Okay, I have a few because I'm an advocate. So I would say, kind of like Alan said, get engaged with politics. As Phil knows, we are very passionate about every level and help. The only way we're going to make the world a better place is to get better people elected into office. So let's help them on every single level. As the Endangered Species Coalition, I would say join coalitions right now. Like I said, people are locking arms like I have never seen and just bulldozing. Do not let the Republicans, do not let these wingnuts rip us apart so that we can help clear the path for Biden and AOC and the progressives to just come through. Like we're a team, right? We have to help them. So get engaged politically. If you are the Space Coast Progressive Alliance, join the Endangered Species Coalition. Let's just everybody like join each other and let's just have these huge numbers and work together. And then the last thing I would say, seriously, I need Florida's help with preventing the next pandemic.
Call you tomorrow?
So if anybody is in curious or wants to help, you have my email address. I would love some assistance with that. And thank you so much for having me. This has been a great experience.
Ori, that is absolutely wonderful. Thank you so much. I have to say thank you very, very, very much for being with us tonight, sharing your wisdom. But more than that, over your life, giving so much, working so hard in so many things to make our world a better place. We are truly indebted to you. I'd like to remind everybody that our next program, March 4th, will be called COVID Cover-Up. It's about the idea of what's been happening in Florida and frankly at the national level about covering up the truth about the coronavirus. We've got Rebecca Jones that's going to be on our panel. She is a person who has worked very, very hard to bring the truth about the actual numbers of disease and deaths in Florida to the public, and she's paid a heavy price for it. We're very hoping to have Dina Grayson. If we're lucky, we'll get her on board. We also have Alessandro Sassoon. He is the reporter at Florida Today who actually broke the story of Rebecca's plight. So this will be a one that you're not going to want to miss. Again, that's March 4th, a month from today, first Thursday in the month of March. Everybody, please, let's give Corey a round of applause. Come on, everybody.
Yeah.
She can hear you. You're off mute now.
Thank you for sticking around. Thank you for saying that.
Thanks to all of you for joining us tonight. This is really wonderful to see your faces, to have all of you on board. Please check out the SCPA website, www.scpaflorida.com, and take a look. See if you want to join us or donate. We certainly appreciate your support. Thanks, everybody. I'm going to say good night, and we'll see you next first Thursday of March.
Bye.
Thanks, Phil.
Thank you.
Bye.